Welcome to another episode of Speak Sex. I am your host, Eve, Eurydice. I am Greek from the island of Lesbos, where the lesbians come from. I've written 3 books on female sexuality, Satiric on USA, published by Scribner, F32, The Second Coming, with Virago, F32. I was a staff writer on sex at Spin Mag and Gear Mag. I wrote the Sex Files column. I am the founder of the Institute for Self-Satisfaction. I have worked on female sexuality and human sexuality for the entirety of my career in many different media. And this podcast is geared toward bringing in the community and embracing the idea of speaking sex for healing of personal trauma, healing of world trauma, kind of speaking our way in truth and honesty through repression and into the light. So my guest today is an ideal guest for that. It's Nicole Soden. She's an artist, a sculptor, a healer, a space activator, and a Taoist master, which she'll explain to us what that means. And she has worked for a long time through sacred sexuality to heal her own traumas and then everyone else's sexual traumas. So welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I was aware of your work and the synergy, between what we do. But now I get the opportunity to find out in detail.
I know. I think it's really great. I've admired your work for a while. And I was even one of the curators for Miami's Independent Thinkers in 2009.
Wow,
we showed your work, and I remember the discussion that we had between the group of curators as you submitted. And I was like, nuts. She's definitely in the show. Yeah. I think that one of the things that I enjoy about your work the most is the playful way that it embraces sexuality in all of its forms and the intricacy of your vision and the way you move the narrative through the images. I think it's really, really well considered.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I use the stitch. I mean, the visual work and the written work are very similar because I use the stitch the same way I use the words, and the signs. Mm-hmm. So I don't really believe in words the way people do who don't think about what they are and how limited they are and where they come from, right?
Sure.
So to me, a word is just like a very limited approximation and tiny way through which we have, so much to express.
Especially if you're not considering your vocabulary in a very mindful way.
Exactly.
Most people, the words always or never comes out of their mouth rather easily.
Right.
And I think that you just shortchange yourself.
Right. And especially when it comes to sex, which is like such a huge part of our private lives, daily lives.
For sure.
And like the generator of all life, right? Without
Absolutely.
it, there is no humanity. And yet we do not talk about it at all. We have no words that were taught when it comes to, articulating sex.
There has been no healthy, I think this is the first generation that's really pushing developing a healthy vocabulary.
I think so too.
And opening things up.
Yeah. Imagine that. I mean, we go to school, it's not mentioned. Our parents, not mentioned. Our peer group, gross.
People just talk about
slutty.
Their conquest.
It's just judgy. And, the body, I mean...
We live in our body.
Exactly.
You'd think
we live in our body. We're controlled
try not to
by
avoid it.
our hormones. There is no way out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I think what happens is that many of us end up having this, dichotomy, this binary dichotomy between the sense of self and the body, and we even treat our body as like a sex object of our own.
Yes.
So we kind of internalize that whole, male gaze.
Which is what the selfie has done.
Right, and the selfie, has promoted that.
We like take a selfie, but just from the neck down, or just the spot, and that's one of the features of pornographic photography, right?
Right.
Isolating the body parts.
Mm-hmm. And you put, you post a photo of you in a bikini, and then you go into the app that, edits it.
Filter.
Right. So you make it look like something that is not you.
Oh, yeah.
And that satisfies you, but it breaks you into two parts.
It fragments
Right.
It fragments it fragments all of the ideation that you have around yourself. It makes you.
It takes you away from your body.
Yeah, but then you get all these likes.
Yeah, exactly.
On it, and so then it triggers all of these like pleasure responses in your body because you've been acknowledged for doing something good, and then there you have it. You're in a loop.
Yeah, you're in that loop where you don't know what your body wants. You don't know how to say it. You're just looking at it from the outside and, presenting it to the world.
That looks great.
Yeah, that looks great. Yeah, that, not I, that.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things a person can do for themselves is develop body awareness and just really begin to accept the manner that your body communicates to you. And that means that you're going to have to face, the mistakes that you're making when you see them,
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, if you give yourself a little slack on that and allow yourself to kind of laugh your way through the process, and
right.
Then you've started your journey,
Yeah, we all, I think, have to like unlearn so much. Is
definitely,
by the time you hit consciousness, I don't know, somewhere in your 20s,
yeah,
and you're like, okay, everything I was told about body, sex, pleasure, I have to, bit
reverse
by bit
engineer,
yeah. And you have to like reprogram each neural pathway.
But those are the people that actually will take the time to do that. Most of the people, most people that I've run into, I mean, there's been an acceleration of people, more and more people being open to consciousness expansion and connecting to different practices that would help or encourage, body awareness. I think that it was unavoidable because of all the different plagues of the Western world that were just badgering us, and all the different strange cancers and everything.
But body awareness and body acceptance and body celebration and body positive, all of that.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
We can't live without it. If we did, we would just...
Well, we do live, but we suffer, and there's so much like self-hatred and, depression and inadequacy and anxiety, and it, so much of it is because we just...
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with your
simply.
sexual identity, and, there's so many people that have like body dysmorphia, and they're perfectly...
natural.
Yeah. And look, there's absolutely nothing wrong with their physique. They're exactly the way their genetics have put them together, which we need genetic diversity in order to maintain the species. and all they do is turn like self-hate inwards. Yeah. And I mean, it is something that actually creates so many diseases. Like, I mean, I work as a healer, right?
So
I was studying Western medicine, and I was going to be a surgeon.
Sorry, I'm laughing, but like you're so far from it.
I know. My parents were like, "Yay, our smartest child." I mean, we at the time, my parents had a second child. A third child, when I was 16. So I have like this pairing. Anyway.
So tell me a little, because
I was,
speaking
yeah.
of child,
Yeah.
let's go back a little bit. So
Sure.
you have a story with your babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
I do.
a good start of your life narrative.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how do the statistics go? 1 in 4 women are sexually abused.
But not that young.
Yeah.
So you were a child.
I was 6. Oh. Yeah. I was 6 and I had a babysitter.
Who was 15?
Yeah, he was 15. And it was fun. You know, we had a couple of babysitters that were girls. And they just basically, you know, talked to the boyfriends all night, you know, bossed us around, ate all the cookies and blamed it on us. And then we had this great babysitter who was a guy who was an older brother of one of the boys in the neighborhood that we hung out with, and he was he was so much fun. Then they moved, and my mom was going to call the old babysitter. Again, we're like, no, it was so much more fun with the guy, you know, the male babysitter. And my brother was there. He's 2 years older than me. But that just made him 8, you know? And yeah, so my mom says, oh, my friend from work, she was working in a clinic. She had a 15-year-old son and was like, oh, this would be, you know, maybe this will work. And then just this weird, and he was great fun and he was cool, but then he started doing all these strange things, you know, like making games turn in different directions. And you know, it went on like, I mean, it worked up to a certain place, and then it went on for a couple months. And I, you know, as it got more and more intense, it was strange. He like treated me like he was actually like really in love with me. Mm-hmm. And it was really this weird kind of thing that I was like, what is this? But like, you know, I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, well, that's the predatory method. I mean, that's the Humbert method in a sense, you know, and that's how they also justify it to themselves. So other than the rapists, you know, most of them will bring in the whole romance narrative,
right? Well, I mean, also
and use it.
Yeah, and he played Dungeons and Dragons, and he was like, you know, it started like as a role playing thing, and like you have these powers, and this is and that, or like, you know, I'd be like, okay, rescue, and so.
The damsel
he'd like
in distress.
He'd tie my brother up to something and be like, okay, you need to try to get out, and Nicole's gonna hide over here, and you know, and it was just like, and then all of a sudden my brother wouldn't be able to help me or
watch
save me.
or
right, and so it was just very strange, and
did you tell your mom? No,
I didn't.
But you did ask for him to stop coming, or?
Well, no, I.
No pun intended.
This was no, just out of nowhere. My body just manifested chickenpox.
Wow, well, that's good.
Yeah, like, yeah, and there was. My mom always said that it was very strange because I had no exposure to any other kids that had chickenpox, just out of nowhere. Boom, chickenpox, and
extreme distress.
And then he ended up getting it, and it's apparently much worse for older people. And
so you got a little tiny bit of revenge.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then I just, you know, the things he told me the whole brainwashing thing. If you ever tell anyone, you know, he told me that there was like some weird, you know, that I was going to go blind and deaf, and that everyone that in my family would go away, and all my friends would, you know, disappear, like that it would be like some, you know, he did some super weirdo Dungeons and Dragons, like pretend style thing, and I was just like, and then terrified. Like when I was in 5th grade, even my best friend moved to Maryland. There was some weird trigger in my head that was like, it's because, and I was like, well, I hadn't even told her, But anyway, some weird.
Well,
he never came back to be our babysitter because he did some weird thing after that. And I just kind of stuffed it. I didn't know how to deal with it. 2 years later.
But that's the power of propaganda,
2 years later, I ended up having appendicitis, and I had told my mom. I read in that book, Madeline, she ended up having appendicitis, and I was just
I remember that.
Yeah.
Madeline.
And I was like, oh, something was wrong with her stomach. So I was like, I must have appendicitis. And, and I kept telling my mom, I have appendicitis, Mom. And she was like, no, you don't. You probably just have gas, honey. Rub your tummy. And, but then, and within 2 years, I manifested appendicitis. And then I was like, okay, fine. Like, my brain wasn't processing that anymore. I definitely suffered from, like, depression, I think, as a child. Because of it, I was very, I was wounded. And I couldn't really understand why. When I was about 15, I had a boyfriend, and he kept pressuring me to, get involved, and I was just like, no. I really stuck with it, and it was.
So when you had sex finally,
and
with your boyfriend,
then I found out
felt traumatic.
Well, I told him the reason I never wanted. He was the first person I told, and I was like, well, the reason I've always pushed it back is because this happened to me when I was younger, and I'm just really not. It makes me nervous. I get kind of freaked out, and he was like, he was very supportive. He had gone through something when he was a child, and I was like, oh wow, that happens.
To more people than just me.
Yeah, exactly. And so I felt comforted. Okay, and then 2 weeks later, I found out that he had never expected me to sleep with him, and he had kept another girlfriend in another school. And I was just like, I had this like double betrayal thing. I was like, oh my God. I told the first person I tell is this. It was horrible. And it was a train wreck. Nobody knows how to talk about it.
Right.
Oh yeah,
and then there was the date rape thing.
Yeah, it was horrible. So, and because nobody talks about sex or whatever. Like I couldn't go talk to my mom or anything like that. And like I ended up, I had like a whatever. It's all stuff that I learned from, right? So, whatever. I ended up having an allergic reaction to the condom spermicide from that. So then I thought I had some terrible venereal disease on top of all of the shame or whatever. And I lost it. And I actually
And then you moved. You were dating someone in a polyamorous relationship.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean,
soon after that.
Yeah. I mean, there was,
which in a way may have been a release you didn't, not consciously, I'm sure, but
I think it was
subconsciously was giving you a break from having it all focused on you.
Yeah. I think that probably actually helped me. By the time I got over that, I went to therapy for 3 years after that bit, and that was fantastic. And I really became more self-empowered, and then I ended up in a relationship with someone who was polyamorous, and I was like, what? I'm 17, 18 years old, he was old. He was 23, 24. But my brain just didn't work with guys my age. And whatever. He was in a band that I was with, you know. He was in a band. It was the 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the 90s.
And
What am I
girls
gonna say?
were coming in and out.
Yeah, and the things were so, yeah. And I had a relationship with a girl. And you know, I had really taken a stand for, you know, gay rights at my school. Mostly just because people were starting to gossip, and I was like, oh, you think you're funny? I'm going to show you funny. And I just made a spectacle out of the people that were trying to make fun of me. And, you know, and turned the whole change. As a matter of fact, someone came up to me when I was in college, and they said, they thanked me for starting the gay revolution at Killian.
Oh.
They were like, thank you so much. You changed everything.
That's great.
Everyone was able to come out after you did that, and the whole school's been different. And I was like, really? Thank you. Yay. So I was in a polyamorous relationship, but it was one that had like a double standard.
Because you were not supposed to have boys coming in and out.
Right. Or anytime I exercised, you know, like I decided to go to the movie with so-and-so. You know, not like I had him in my bed, you know, or anything like that. He would freak out. And I was like, wow.
And what about you
So
with
how
girls?
does that-
Was it
how
okay if you slept with girls?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's also a very familiar trope, you know, and I really don't know why, because, you know, being with a woman is equally powerful, but for some reason, guys, you know...
they think, well,
make
it's
it
not
into
like they can replace my dick or
right,
anything.
exactly.
Sorry.
They think that...
Okay, so well, at least she doesn't have a cock. I mean, you'll always be back.
Yeah, and they think that it's all for, like, their visual pleasure, and it mystifies me, but...
Oh, yeah. I think that for the visual pleasure, I had a boyfriend one time who kept trying to art direct our like sex.
Yeah,
I was like, I know
or videotaping everything.
You work for a huge ad agency and you're really great art director, but like, please. Please, can we work on what feels good as opposed to like angles?
How it looks.
Camera angles.
Yeah.
Because like I'm not enjoying myself right now. but I'm sure it's a great shot. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things happen. You know, I think everybody has a story that's filled with challenges and painful situations. I think that the way to really get around that is to take those situations and to turn them into something that you build on and that you allow the transformation to occur. Shortly after I had this, you know, experience with the polyamorous relationship, I still had a lot of anger that I hadn't dealt with, and I was completely like, I didn't have sex at all, and I was just like, you know, I was struggling with the conflict of the multiplicity of these different traumas, and nobody knew how to really listen. I mean, my mom was really nice and gave me this book called The Wounded Heart, which was a workbook for dealing with using faith to deal with your, you know, childhood sexual trauma. And I was like, thank you, but and I know Jesus loves me a lot. I love him too. But but please don't show me a Bible verse to help me understand rape.
I know.
Like, I'm not ready for that. Thanks, Mom. Like, and I was angry, and I started working. I worked as a performer, and that's where I found a lot of release. Dancing gave me back like my spirit.
With the body, because it's physical. So
Yeah. And so
use your body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was able
in
to
a public
reclaim-
space, in front of others. So that's very empowering.
I mean, the night that I came back into that strength, I was just by a lake, under the stars, and I had taken some awesome LSD, and I was like, when was the last time I was actually happy? And I realized it was when I was dancing, when I was a little girl, like in dance class or whatever. And I decided I just needed to dance more. And so I just stood up and just started, And then that was it. And like the universe just provided me with the opportunity.
No,
That's what it gave.
I think it's a great form of therapy. Gabriel Roth has had a whole career based on that. You just dance the ecstatic dance until... you free yourself as much as possible from the scarring of the trauma,
Absolutely. And you
the residue.
And that's what it is. It's almost like an internal energetic like scrubbing.
Exactly.
And your whole body gets involved. When you're working with a tool, you have a repetitive motion, your whole body's not completely involved. But when you're dancing or when you're involved in some,
Yeah. Well, that's also the original Kundalini meditation, the way that Osho introduced it. It's just dance. Dance yourself until you're free from all that interior, whatever, trash.
Definitely. And
until you're no longer a dumpster.
Yeah, until you're no longer a dumpster. Yeah, and then you can fill yourself up with all the good good
and
juice.
you find
All
but
the
it takes a
goodness.
long time. I mean,
It does,
what's
because when you
important to
don't-
say is that it takes years. It's not like there is no quick fix.
No, there's no quick fix. Also, because by the time you realize that there's something truly wrong or something wrong that's stuck with you, then it's abscessed already. And it's grown into different areas, and it's affected you holistically, whether you understand it or not. And most of the time, what culture provides us with is our modeled behaviors for reinforcing the negative or reinforcing the structure of, the poor health choices,
Well, misogyny, patriarchy, all of that. You're reinforcing that.
Yeah, and tolerances about sexual harassment and rape and all these things.
Yeah.
But I mean, just as many. I mean, I don't know about just as many, but I know I've met several guys that have gone through similar things. And I'm sure,
Oh yeah, me too.
Worse, totally.
Me too. I've met guys who were, first like fingered by their grandmothers. I mean, it's just the stories are.
Oh my God,
There's so many stories.
Yeah, it's so.
Their aunts,
And that's
in
just
childhood.
Yeah.
So they're
But
the
like this,
teachers.
I have a friend. I have a friend who
Middle school. I have a friend whose middle school teacher, taught him how to eat her out in order to teach him how to have sex with girls. But she never pleased
middle
him.
school. Oh wow.
How, imagine that
Wow.
little psyche growing up.
Yeah, but I mean, I have a friend who his mother was a lesbian, and his mother's girlfriend taught him how to gave him his first sexual exploration, but he considers it to be like one of the greatest gifts of his life. He's like, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, wow.
I mean, a lot of the
She
guys.
must
I
have
think
done
that,
it in a very celebratory way for you to feel like.
No, I
everything's-
think that's actually not unusual, and the reason is that it's harder for men to, embrace the consciousness of passivity, of being a victim, of having something done to you. That's much more difficult for, especially straight men.
Yeah.
And so I think
My
that it's
brother
easier
didn't
for
do
them
well.
to say, it taught me how to be better in bed and how to please women or how to, be sex positive. But whether it's in your 20s or 40s or 60s, the thing's going to catch up with them.
Oh, it does. Yeah,
because they had no agency, and there is no denying that. They had no agency. Whether or not they liked it, they had no agency. They were not asked.
Right, sure. Yeah.
And I think that's the big, and that's like the big thing that we've learned because of Me Too. And I, I'm very happy about that because...
Oh, I'm so glad that happened.
In our generation, even date rape, like I feel like date rape was so vaguely understood.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And I mean, there were whole drugs like pushed for it. Like I remember
the drugs but also like the boundaries, like if you were really good friends with someone, or even more, confusing, if you had already slept with someone before consensually.
Yes.
Then you didn't even know. Like, you didn't know, what is this? Because I didn't want it to happen, but I had wanted it to happen once before. Or like, we were in bed together.
Oh, yeah,
was I asking for it? There was no,
no.
There were no definitions.
I know. And that was something that happened in my situation. There was the person that, that I had this experience with. I had slept with them once before, like the year before or something. And I was out and somebody had put something in my drink. And he was like, well, I think something happened. I think somebody put something in your drink. I'm going to take you home. Da-da. I thought he was driving me to my house. And I was like, wow, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then I passed out in his car. And then when I woke up, I woke up in the middle of this action, and I was like...
In the middle of having sex or
being I was like, what? And the first thought was like, wait a second. How come...
What's he doing?
Like, what's going on? How did I get to this place? What was said? What transpired? And I'm like, no, the last thing I remember was falling asleep in his car.
Yeah.
And then... the whole next day, I mean, and whatever. It was strange. Like, I had to get home, and he just kept trying to reassure me, like he had really taken care of me, and I was like, and he was like, wow, anyone could have done that shit, if that, and I was like, oh, so I'm lucky that it was just you, that did it. And it was like, I'm just going to go home and, have a nice glass of water and collect myself. But as the day moved on and the next day, it starts all sinking
suffering.
in. I went to my doctor and talked to her. And she was like, yep, that's what you call it. And I was shaken, I don't think I went out of my house for 6 months or something.
Yeah.
And what saved me from full blown recluse for ever was these two beautiful little Mormon missionary boys that came and knocked on my door, and they were just so shiny faced and just like these
pure.
Oh my gosh, they don't even touch. By the time they go through there. They don't even have direct skin contact with women for 2 years. And I was like, oh, wait a second.
These guys are safe.
I was like, look at these strapping young lads. They were so handsome, too. I was like, oh.
Yeah, they give you your power back.
And they wanted me to, and they wanted to talk about faith and archaeology basically, and I was like, oh, step into my parlor. It was a beautiful gift that I feel like I received. And so I met with them and I talked to them, and I because of I lived in a house where we would go to church every Sunday. I went to Christian school, all these things. So,
Catholic?
Yeah, no,
Protestant?
Yeah. And, I went to Westminster Christian School for many, many years. I finished at a public high school. But it was, my parents always taught the occult seminars or the I did a lot of comparative religious studies just because, it's something that, was around. It was just around, and so when these Mormons came to they're called elders. They're called elders, by the way. The boys are on a mission, and they're called elders. Anyway, they, the only 20-year-old elders you'll meet, by the way, which is adorable. And they came, and I was like, oh, it's you. I was like, I start recalling. I was like, Reformed Egyptian, huh? They used an Uman and Thuman to see through, and they were just like, they thought I was a member of their church, just like taking the piss at the door. And I was like, no, I just did a lot of comparative religious studies, and I've learned a lot about certain things. So I just was like, these two guys want to come over and debate religion with me for a couple weeks? Okay. And I felt like at the end of it, I just really needed, a ritual cleansing, So I went and I let myself be baptized.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I had just been...
Wow.
I had just been raped, and they were offering me a ritual, like this God delivered, the universe delivered
cleansing.
These pure, these pure boys to my house to come and offer me the ritual cleansing that I needed. And I saw it exactly for what it was, and I just appreciated it, and I was like, thanks.
And was that like
but I had no intention of joining a ward and
Mormonism
marrying.
right.
No, I just needed, I felt
the ritual.
I feel like the universe delivered these safe, pure boys, to my house so that I could talk about different things, and I talked to them about, what their
they were
what their sexuality was, and I was like, tell me about your undergarments,
right, yeah.
And I asked all the questions somebody would have wanted to ask them, and we debated a number of different things, and I'm glad I had the chance to do that because they were like the two safest
models of masculinity that you could get at that time.
Exactly, and I needed it, and I mean, they probably were a little upset that I didn't keep going to church. But I had other stuff to do.
So was that your entry, you'd say, into your journey through sacred sexuality and, sex and religion?
Well, I mean, I think that...
making sex holy again?
Oh, no. No, I think I've always... I don't know. I've always kind of been aware of the concept. When I was a little girl and I found out that you could marry God, I was like, no way.
Oh, the bride of Christ.
I was like, nuns are married to God. No way, that must be awesome. And that was like, if you asked me, like at 5 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would have been like, I want to be a nun. And then my dad started explaining to me, well, there are no Protestant nunneries, and then he started breaking down for me all the dogma of the Catholic Church that he didn't agree with because he had been raised Catholic, and he was like, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, by the way, this is pagan, that's pagan, blah, blah. Like, my father was like Mr. Counterculture. And we knew.
I lapsed.
It was fantastic.
You get a lapsed
stuff.
Catholic parent, man.
Yeah.
He's not getting away from that.
And so he told me all that stuff, and I was like, whoa, you guys sure screwed this up, Yeah. I was like, it sounds like it should be the most awesome job in the world.
So how did you get from there,
I just knew,
from that home into Tao experience,
Tao
monastery,
right.
and then Tao mastery.
Right. So when I was 21, I started having this weird experience of like car accidents, and I like not just like, oh that was strange and unfortunate. Like, no, in a period of 3 years, I had 5 car accidents, like back to back, full totals.
Wow.
And I was like, what the fuck?
You were shaking.
What's going on? But really what needed to happen was just that everything around, like in my life, just needed to like break into pieces so that it could be remade. Because if there was any fragment of that, that prison that I had created itself around my life experience and the things that stopped me from becoming who I really wanted to be, or expressing myself, or even knowing what it was that I wanted to be at all. I had to.
Well, you kept being stopped at your tracks again and again.
Yeah, and I was like,
until
so I was like, well, this
changed direction completely.
And I ended up going to finding my way, a Taoist mission. I met a guy who was a philosophy major, and he asked me what I believed in, and I explained to him my philosophy. I had all these kids on my block that we all had to live by the same rules in the family. Nobody could lie, nobody could disrespect their parents, nobody could steal, nobody could commit all of these crimes against their fellow man, and everybody needed to be polite. So I was like, how come I can't spend the night at my Japanese friend's house on Saturday night, because we have to go to church in the morning? I don't understand. And like on my block growing up, there was a Japanese family, a Chinese family, an Indian family, and, Catholics, Baptists, people from all over. It was like all the kids just ran together, and we had a wonderful time, but everybody's parents had something to say about everybody else's house. Like, wow.
The other.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
A lot of other people.
Right, yeah. And I was just like, well, it concerned me that that all of my friends were going to go to hell. So I really was trying to figure it out. And it gave me an amazing opportunity to question the leaders of my church. With some,
so what was this Taoist
real
mission?
pure things. They could never answer me. And so when this guy asked me what I believed, and I told him, I said, I think that there's like this universal truth. And he said, that sounds like Taoism. And I was like, really? And he hands me the book, The Tao of Pooh. And I was like, cool. He's like, keep it. I was like, thanks. And then then the next time I saw the guy, there was like absolutely no chemistry or attraction. It was super weird. And it was like all he needed to do was like hand me that book, and then it just clicked out. And then within 6 months, there was a Taoist mission that opened up in the horse country in Miami.
Oh, that's what brought you here.
And they had sent a mission over from China, just like all of the Christian and Catholic missionaries
right,
sent. They were
right.
like, well, and they said that it was because of because the time of Maitreya was almost upon us, and we were told we had to come to Miami.
Sweet.
That they received a word.
Oh my God, I love this story.
So they came, and I was like, no kidding.
And you came too.
And then I was there. They had just set up the temple, and it was in a, like they had bought a big house on 5 acres out in horse country, and it was they just ran, and it was great. There are a bunch of people that that came, who was there also. Evie, she does a lot of, she's in India right now, but there were a lot of people that went to the temple with me that are actually doing well. Claudia Costa, and she does combo healing, and Anyway, so I was there, and I studied there for 3 years, and that was while I was going through all of those car accidents. So all I could do was go to physical therapy and just try to fix my broken body, and I went to the Taoist temple, and I went to the Taoist temple and cultivated, and I just kept cultivating. And
so what did that teach you about sexuality and healing,
well,
sexual healing?
I didn't really like the one thing that I learned the most in the temple was understanding the formal and ritual aspects of taking the time to put this much effort into achieving like your balance, or it was very thorough. Like, ceremonies was like 1,000 bows, and like, and you would get into these meditative whole body sort of trance states, and it was beautiful, and it's what my spirit needed.
And very physical. It's a very physical form of worship, or I don't know if we'd call it worship. Energy.
I really was I needed the Tao to rediscover real balance in my life, but it was a heck of a journey.
That's the whole unlearning.
Right. And so I ended up leaving, I was supposed to take a higher, initiation in the temple, purification of the mouth ceremony. And I was like, what does that entail exactly? And they're like, well, no, the standards, no drinking, no smoking, no drugs, no foul words, no meat.
No sex.
No garlic, no onions. And I was like, wait.
Yes, sex
I was
or
like,
no
hang
sex?
on a second. Only ein Minuten, bitte. What in the world is wrong with garlic and onions? And,
They make you aggressive.
Well,
that's what I've heard. I eat them, but that's what the explanation is. That
sure,
they make,
it's heat.
Yeah.
But then you need balance. I ended up sitting there, speaking to the master and his first mate, about it, and I was able to turn I was actually able to just in this really well mannered and polite way express the exact reason why having garlic and onions and a glass of red wine was one of my truths. Having Northern European blood
was one of the requirements for life.
German Irish on my father's side, German English on my mother's side, and like heart disease and high cholesterol ran on one's on one side of the family, one's on the other, and I was like, I'm pretty positive that those are things that I should do for the rest of my life. So that's a truth that you need to understand, because, and I know that there were plenty of, there's a different, reaction to alcohol. And, I had a friend who was Malaysian who just turned bright red every time she would drink anything. I was like, I could see what you would say.
You might profit from not drinking.
Yeah. I was like,
you don't tolerate it.
So, and then, the master just smiled and looked at me, and he was like, you're wiser than your years. And
nice.
He said, don't stop cultivating. Don't stop cultivating. Stick with it. Keep doing it. And so I did. And when I was working and performing at Backdoor Bambi, I had already spent 3 years in a Taoist temple. And everything that I was understanding and learning, everything that I did from that time onward, I saw with the true sight of the Tao. That's what happens when you have the initiation. They open your heavenly portal.
Yeah.
And you see things for as they really are. And that also gives you access to understand and see the flow of energy patterns in spaces and in people and in, understanding the flow in the things. And if I hadn't kept cultivating, then, I wouldn't have learned it to the degree that, that's so finely tuned now.
So now you're a master of.
Yes, I just got.
Congratulations.
Oh man, that's been It took me took a hell of a long time. When I was in my 21st year of initiation, I ended up like shaving the top of my head, which is considered a tonsure. And I just was tired of hiding my wisdom. I was like,
Nice.
it's time. And I have this streak here naturally. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be sharing my wisdom with people now, as opposed to trying to pretend like I can do anything else.
Right. Yeah.
And I moved my, I think that all the different hardships that I had, I made sure that they didn't break me. Okay, so you're broken.
Wiser.
So it happens.
Right.
Everybody goes through some kind of breaking, some sense of terrible loss, because that's what life's about. We're supposed to overcome things. We're supposed to meet challenges. We're supposed to become stronger than we started out. That's what, we're chromosomes in the cosmic body. We need to grow and evolve and adapt. We have to share information and create new systems.
Mm-hmm.
That's emergent theory.
Mm-hmm.
And what, isn't it wonderful that sex is so much fun? Because that's one of the most basic ways you can create something.
Exactly.
But it's
one of the most basic portals for liberation, because it hasn't been taken over by the system, by whatever dominant, social system, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
It hasn't.
It exists inside you.
Right.
So
it exists in the wild.
Yeah, there are constructs that come from our social system that do their best to wrangle us in and keep us.
Right, but they stop outside the actual sexual act. Once you're one naked, lights dim or whatever, all those constructs for that short period of time are gone.
Well,
and just you and
with any luck, a person can get rid of them. But plenty of people bring all those constructs into their sexuality, and I think that's one of the things that I try to do with the healing work that I have.
Yeah.
Because
and that's why that's why we're here, and also, by the way, that's why we try to get the next generation just a touch freer, a touch more ready, a little more mature.
Oh, sure.
Give them more words.
Yeah, that's what's going on with my daughter. My daughter's 12. And so I'm like, how do I raise my daughter? How do I teach sex positivity without encouraging promiscuity?
Exactly.
How do I deal with?
That's a good question.
And my daughter identifies as bisexual, if not more interested in girls, honestly. And I was just like, well, that's great, babe. Love is love in our house.
That's right.
And
we're all bisexual. Do I sound like a bad song?
No. No, I think everybody has variations of it.
I think so too. And I feel kind of sad that we have these distinct categories. So if you're gay, you can't but be gay. I feel like everyone contains every possibility.
The other day, someone told me I said something about what the heterosexual relationships that some gay men have had, and my friend who looked over me, who was gay, and was like, "Oh no, what was it? Oh no, it's a straight guy," and he was like, "What? That never happens." And I was like, how many gay men do you know? There's plenty of. I mean, everyone. I've met very few people that have never tried the other ice cream flavors. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I think that it's interesting what's happening with the non-binary exploration. I think that what's happening is it's an elegant response to the structure and conformity of what the things that define the patriarchy, because it is,
exactly
like the popularity of the drag revolutions and the trans, what's happening with the acceleration of transgender and your gender identity, and changing things, or like, I just think that that it almost needed to happen, partly to smack the patriarchy.
Yeah, no, I agree. We have to try to stay fluid, and again, we can't speak for everyone, but I agree. Like, everything that seems to be fluid and going through from one gender to the other, or non-binary, is wonderful, because every move, every revolution gets co-opted by the patriarchy, or by the system. I don't want to just call it patriarchy and look like men take advantage of it, because they don't. But the point is, you have like the queer revolution, and then within one generation they are turned into the status quo, and they have gay marriage, and they adopt kids, and they do the same exact thing. It doesn't, so they're fully co-opted. They are the same, they believe in capitalism and accumulating and not paying taxes. So there is nothing revolutionary at all about it, So like Stonewall or whatever, and I feel that this is kind of like America's tendency for Puritanism, is to put like strict, categories.
Oh, yeah.
And like good and bad, right and wrong.
And that's not...
gay and straight. So avoiding this... is healthy.
I think that switching our perspective from dualistic to monistic is an important thing for us to understand, because we all come from the same place. We all have, like, the ideas that there are masculine qualities and feminine qualities are completely... I think it's false, because I can be just as strong and courageous as any guy, and any guy can be just as emotional and nurturing, And right. I think that it's high time we stopped complaining about the other people's stuff, and just start sharing, that men can be beautiful, and tender and nurturing, and that women can be strong. And you know what? And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to ask for help to put up this bookshelf, because sometimes you just need someone to hold the other side for you.
That's right.
That's nice. It's okay. I mean, I'm a sculptor. I can do a lot of things that a lot of guys can't. But I mean, I appreciate what some men are trying to do, as far as evolve their own personal, understand their own personal story, to learn that they need to become
full.
And also women are realizing that they need to become their own heroes, and that men, and we're deciding. I feel like as the collective consciousness is more fully engaged in making decisions about where its future is going, because there were some people that were, the dominant energetic paradigm was full of was a load of bollocks.
Yeah.
It was just a load of bollocks.
Yeah.
So
good.
Yeah.
Well, that's about it. We talk non-stop for a full hour.
I know, and I feel like I still have like a million stories to tell you.
Good. So you come back. Come back.
You guys got my intro.
Yes. Thank you, Nicole.
There's more
for
juicy
coming.
Stories to come.
And
thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. This is the end of this episode of Speak Sex.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.